this afternoon. But shifting focus then, former USTR official Mark Linscott tells ET Now that an India-US trade agreement remains some distance away, with multiple issues unresolved across tariffs, non-tariffs barriers and broader market access. He said that while interim deal terms appear locked with no renegotiation expected, the risk of Section 301 action remains plausible if no breakthrough emerges by May. Here's an excerpt of that chat.
Well, I think this is a very welcome development. It's been 3 or 4 months since the two negotiating teams got together, and I sense that there's much to be done to accomplish a final concluded interim agreement. So that will be the focus next week here in Washington, to sit down at the table to resolve a number of pending issues. There was a framework agreed for the interim agreement several months ago in February, but there are lots of fine details to be worked out, from specific tariff lines and tariff cuts to actions on non-tariff barriers.
Right, Mark, but we do have investigations under Section 301 which have been imposed on India. In the near term, do you sense that those will be waived off, or will they continue?
Well, it's a bit of a delicate dance here between the ongoing 301 investigations and the continuing negotiations between the United States and India on an interim agreement, which is part of a more comprehensive bilateral trade agreement that the two have ambitions for. It's clear that the administration is intending that the 301 actions lead to tariffs that will likely replicate the tariffs that had previously been in place, the reciprocal tariffs that had been in place addressed to a number of different countries. So, it's hard to predict where these 301 tariffs will come out, how they relate to the reciprocal tariffs that were previously in place under IEEPA, how the agreements that have already been negotiated are factored into the 301 tariffs. I mean, this is the big question mark facing all of us at this point.
Right. So even as we talk, Mark, the Indian government has been waiting for a new trade architecture since the IEEPA tariffs got struck down by the US Supreme Court. Does this essentially mean that the deal contours will be drawn up again, and will it again take a couple of months to get finalized?
No, well, one, there's clearly been a delay. There's been a delay of at least 2 or 3 months, and that's because the two teams have not been able to get together. I think that's unfortunate. It was understandable that the Indian side would take a pause and, essentially assess what the situation, given the momentous action by the Supreme Court to strike down those IEEPA tariffs. But some time has been lost. I don't think the deal is going to be redone. I think both sides are committed to concluding the terms of the interim agreement. I don't think there will be any rewriting of the commitments that have already been made. The one risk factor, I think this is a real risk factor for India, is if there is a perception that there's not a serious effort to try to conclude this interim agreement, let's say by the end of May, there's always the potential that recommended action from USTR under 301 comes out with a higher tariff than that 18% that had been previously agreed. But I think ultimately the goal is to get back to what's already been negotiated and pin it all down and use 301 as, frankly, a facilitator for that. That's how I like to see it.
All right, before we wrap up this edition